it's Warren Coughlin here. Welcome back to the Business That Matters Spotlight. I'm really excited because this episode may challenge you, dear listener, to rethink some of your perspectives. I've been looking forward to this conversation a lot because I hope you stay with us, as this may challenge some of your own beliefs and perceptions about what's possible. Today's guest offers basically a case study in the extent to which you can apply your values to your business. Lots of people talk about how they'd like to do good and do more, but they just can't because competitors don't, or it might kill margins or that kind of thing. Well, today's guest is going to challenge some of those narratives. She set up a challenge for herself to create a proof of concept of embedding human rights into her business, and is doing so profitably. So we want to look at how she's managing to do that. Brooke Mullen is the founder of Sapahn. Brooke, welcome to the Spotlight.
Hi, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you. Now, I want to start at the beginning. I'm really fascinated how kind of the fire gets ignited. In your case, if I remember right, it started with a classmate who was an exchange student, right?
Yes, in high school. So yeah, I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska, in the middle of the U.S. And I had
the heartfelt of human rights activism.
Right. And fashion, best place to build a fashion brand. And one of my classmates was from Hungary, and we were in DECA class together. And I just became super fascinated by this opportunity and this whole another world out there that you could study abroad in another country at a young age. And so she sparked this whole curiosity that this would be possible. Now, my parents are super young, and they were and also just we don't have the means to make that happen. And so, of course, behind the scenes, I'm emailing all these people, and the Rotary Club contacts me. And they're like, we have an amazing opportunity for you to study abroad in Romania if you'd like. And I thought, that's not, where I was thinking, the top list I had in mind. I didn't even know really where Romania was. But I was like, there's a scholarship and an opportunity. And, a couple of days later, they came to my parents' house and had a conversation about that opportunity. Next thing you know, that was my middle of my junior year. So I enrolled to be a senior and finished my junior year of high school, essentially, and with my older brother who hated that. I stole a little of the spotlight, and then moved to Romania for a year, and was very eye-opening and totally changed the trajectory, I think, of what I do today and the why.
And how old were you?
I moved there when I was just turned about 17. Yeah.
And so was it like a billeting? Were you living with a family or no?
Yeah. Every 3 months I'd switch a new family. And this was before we had internet. But we didn't have Facebook. It was more Messenger. So I would go to internet cafes once a week to talk to my family. So I was really, really living very removed from my life back in the US. And I was on the traveling volleyball team. I didn't speak Romanian's Latin based, so I knew Spanish enough. And so I was able to pick up the language decent. But halfway through, I met, around Christmas time, I met this other woman from the US, and she was with the Peace Corps volunteers. She was a Peace Corps volunteer, and I had no idea again what that was, but that again opened another door. And so for the last 6 months or 5 months that I was there, I just traveled around Romania, staying with Peace Corps volunteers and learning about the different initiatives and social things that they were doing in the country. And so I was working a lot with orphanages who at that time were deinstitutionalizing. So they were going from these massive institutions where there's kids, in cribs and whatnot with, 1 or 2 adult care providers all into these group homes. And so I got to see kind of the before and after of some of those experiences and transitions. And, we did a lot with, young kids and, giving the public needles with drug abuse. And so there was just so many different dynamics socially that I'd never seen or thought of. And I got to see, just see firsthand what some of those challenges were.
And then how did that transition? You did a business program, is that right, in Asia?
Yeah. So came back to the States, did a community college, transferred to the University then of Nebraska, and again, enrolled into some study abroad experiences. One was in the summer where we got to go to China, Japan, and Korea and study small business marketing and international business, essentially. And so that again was very eye-opening. Like the chaos, the hustle and the bustle, just the mass amount of people, and it just again lit this whole fire under me of like, the world is like, there's so much to explore, So I think if anyone, once you travel, it's just like this bug that you're like, okay, I need to, like, what am I doing? What am I doing not traveling? So
I've backpacked lots of places around the world in my youth and traveled elsewhere. I'm a big believer in travel as being just a uniting force. But when you travel, I'm always curious, like, were you more moved or impacted by the differences or the similarities?
Both, I think. I think there was like really shocking. It was like, on the things where there is so many similarities. And I think like, in Thailand, they're known for the land of the smiles. And so it was just like, wow, like you could be, this whole thing of like, you don't have to have all these things to be so happy. You don't have to have all these material things. And at the same, and that's when I realized as well is like, the materialism also traps us. We're indebted to the things we own. And it's like, so it just totally showed me a different way, also in a different mindset. But in a lot of ways, yes, we're human. We want the same things. Like, we want agency, we want autonomy, we want the basic, I guess, fundamental human rights. We want to feel loved and nurtured and have the ability to say in what we do every day. And, that was.
I remember sitting in outside at this guest house in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and the cab driver who helped people just at this particular location, he and I were always hanging out together. And one day we were just sitting across a teak table having a Mekong whiskey, laughs. And I remember thinking, here's this white lawyer from downtown Toronto, having a whiskey with this cab driver from northern Thailand and just finding common ground. And it was like, there's truth and just beauty here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so so that was sort of business and cultural integration. Where did the human rights passion ignite from?
I think it was originally it's kind of from my childhood but I think just seeing different, kids who had different opportunities or lack of, and so we, my family would from time to time, serve at the soup kitchen and different things like that. So just small exposures there. But where it really ignited was in when I was a foreign exchange student in Romania, and that just kind of kept expanding, really seeing kind of a little bit more behind the curtains of like when I was in Asia, seeing, oh, this is what a factory looks like. And really, this is like how things are made. And, being from the States and, Nebraska, like I didn't even really think about how things were made and who they were made by. So
how did you get into factories? Like, it's not a normal thing.
Sure.
But I'm going to go backpack, I'm going to go travel somewhere, and I'm going to pop in a factory.
Right. So I got lucky and aligned. I married a guy I knew since I was in middle school, and we both, a month later, we got married right after college. A month later, we moved to Thailand to study human rights. He had a military background and also wanted to change the course of how making an impact in a global capacity. And so he had some human rights classes. And that's when the concept I got turned on was through him. And so we really wanted to study abroad. To get this degree abroad, you could do some great legal courses in the US, but we really wanted that grassroots feel of learning from other people who live and breathe in these contexts. And so Thailand actually has an amazing program. It's also where the regional UN is. And so we moved to Salaya, Thailand, which is like an hour and a half west of Bangkok, and got involved in an amazing program there. It's credited through the EU and some different agencies. And that's kind of when it really started. He was going the academic route. I had no idea what I was going to do with this degree. I'm not an academic, but I loved the topic, and I loved, it was just so vast and so broad. I also was really interested in the issue of human trafficking. Great, a huge place to kind of be is in Thailand, kind of studying that. And so I got involved. I did an internship with the UN. They had a project on human trafficking, an interagency project. And that just like lit up for me, reading case studies and having that exposure of really on the ground, like what was happening and why, people were migrating in search of work, and not just like really like leaving their whole villages behind, selling even some land just to have enough money to go find work because there was no work in the remote communities. And that struck, like, how do you generate, like what type of income generation projects or, how can you change that course, even for a country, right? And so they were migrating in search of work. And of course, a lot of trafficking happens with that, with labor migration and exploitation. Men were being trafficked onto fishing boats. And so, held captive at sea. Like that was just a big, like whole different, again, exposure. The other, how we got into factories was through our program. So we went and talked to migrants, the factories that, peel all the shrimp that is eaten in the US, essentially, that's distributed through Sam's Club and Costco, and talking to those factory workers and just understanding how the challenges of what their day-to-day look like, where they're working on their feet, 15 hours a day, very limited opportunities to go to the bathroom, and just some different, and then they have kids. They're migrants from Burma, and then they have kids, and then they don't have documentation to go back to their own countries. And so you just realize the vulnerability people is at stake, right? And so that's kind of that trickle that, got me really, again, with more questions, not answers. But I kept meeting what I love markets. Markets are everywhere, as you know, in Thailand and Asia, and they're just vibrant. And I started becoming friends with some of the local makers. And, one woman was making silk, and it was 100% silk, all handmade. And that blew my mind. Like, what's that process all even look like? But she was living, her village where she made everything, and her community was 12 hours from there. And so I was kind of thinking, God, really incredible, beautiful craft. And how could you build these businesses more sustainably in these rural communities? So it was kind of another thought going in my head, and I didn't know what to do, not sure what the vehicle was. But not long after all of this, a couple months later, we spent a lot of time in Myanmar, where my husband did his dissertation, and meet this young girl, very vibrant. And she, very common, very poor, taking care of her mom. Her dad left. And so it was a cycle of poverty, having to prostitute on the side, make ends meet. And she was my age, our age, early 20s, mid 20s. And I looked at her and I was like, what changes this? Like, how do you get out of this cycle of poverty? Here I am studying this and going, I should ask the person who, has the best answer. And she was like, education. So I thought, cool. Okay. She goes, there's a lot I can do if I have a higher education, but I can't afford it. I can't, I have to work, all these things. So I thought I could come up with the scholarship. Like, I'm sure I could figure out a way to create a scholarship for this woman to come to school. And so in October of 2009, I, said that right at the table. I was like, would you come study with us if we could figure this out, if I could figure this out? And she was like, 100%. So I got to work, bought a bunch of things from all these women. Really gorgeous things, and was just having the best time. And then in April of 2010, went back to Lincoln, Nebraska, had a trunk show at my parents' house, and everything sold, essentially.
Wow.
And
what was this young woman's name?
Her name's Mary too.
Nice.
Yeah. But she was one of these people that you could just, so brilliant, and I kept thinking, like, if you could empower this woman, she's going to empower the masses. She just has this magic social intelligence that most people don't. She knows how to make things happen. Mm-hmm. And she cares, right? Like, she's got a huge, she's brave, she's courageous. And so that's what we did. And while I was home, I created an S Corp, met with some attorneys, created a formal business, and then went back to Thailand. A month later, she came and studied with us. And for the first 2.5 years, I just used the profits of the company to support her scholarship. There's obviously some more nuances of that, but it gave me a chance to go and explore this whole, at the time, and still today, big brands are saying, well, we can't be responsible for our supply chain. We've never been to our factory. Most of them have never been to all the their factories.
Right.
And I'm going, well, how is that possible? Like, I'm going to all these, yes, there's smaller co-ops and practices, but not all of them. And I'm going and talking to the people who are making these beautiful pieces of work. So why, with no resources, one person, I'm like, so why can't they? And so I kind of just went on this quest of discovery and, to learn a little bit more is how could we change? I mean, something that it impacts all of us is fashion, right? It's global. It touches everyone. And seeing behind the curtain of actually the negative impacts it has on people when it doesn't have to was really kind of like a wake up call to me that like I need to use and have a stronger, louder voice.
So stop there. So when you say that, what are the, like for people who don't know, like a lot of people who just, all they know about fashion is they go to the store and buy it and they look at the label that says made in Thailand or made in Taiwan. So what are those negative things that you saw that needed changing or addressing?
Yeah. When you talk to people, their work week is 70 some hours, 75, on a machine. And it's so rigorous. They're paid by the piece oftentimes, or, with shrimp by the piece, and you can't leave. So they all then end up with a lot of health issues, which they can't afford. And there's no, and they're paid not even minimum wage. They're very, paid subpar wages that really doesn't make anything sustainable for them. And
that's why we get 10% off on some t-shirt or something.
Well, that's why you're like, wow, why is that? Gosh, only $3 for this t-shirt, huh? Somewhere somebody is paying that cost, and it's the people who are making it. And so I think that was the biggest wake-up call. Like, yeah,
working conditions that, like, apart from just long hours, are the working conditions problematic? Absolutely,
yeah. Not the proper, just working with chemicals, not sometimes the proper masks, very like tight quarters. Also, just for women, a lot of harassment, a lot of sexual violence, because there is no accountability. There is no way if something happens, who do you go to? Right. There's no protections.
All right. So you see all of this and you're starting to just get some crafts coming. When does it turn into Sapahn?
Well, it came Sapahn when I made the business official, and Sapahn means bridge in Thai. And when we were thinking about what do we call this thing, this project, and I kept thinking like, what are we doing? We're bridging people. We're, creating this whole like community. And it became, I would say, within the first 2 years, I had people, other boutiques, other wholesalers calling me, emailing me. I was in Thailand. So I would come back from October to Christmas and do all these art shows and craft fairs and home parties. And somebody reached out and said, we'd love to carry your collection. And I'm going, I have no idea what that even looks like. Again, no retail background, no fashion, no art, nothing, like no background in this space.
What was the collection? Was it clothing or was it a bigger array?
Yep. It was a huge array at the beginning. So at one point I worked for the first couple of years. I was in 9 villages. I was developing 9 product lines essentially every year. So we had scarf lines, several different scarf lines. And that would mean so we had silk and we would have maybe 10 different designs that I would help with the artisans create. Because there was a gap. One of the main things when I realized at the initial, there's a gap in quality. So sometimes they would make this beautiful piece of fabric, but then their stitching was just not clear or not clean. Or then they didn't have access, a really cheap 10-cent zipper when they could have bought, a $1 zipper and it would be life-changing, but they didn't have that connection necessarily or the capital sometimes. And then the other part was design. So oftentimes they have incredible talents, but sometimes how do you take those skills and translate them into something that would be more appealing to everyday women in the US? So just more modernized in some ways. And so that's when I started doing. I didn't really know much about the whole industry. This opportunity really woke me up and said, here's another wholesale opportunity. So I had to change my whole pricing, and we were early then. So it was kind of a hodgepodge of jewelry, scarves, blankets, even, because as I'd get to one community, they'd say, Brooke, there's another community 10K from here. You need to go meet them. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, they make these plastic baskets that were absolutely incredible, that were woven with the plastic material that you put over shipping boxes, to make it really tight. They were weaving beautiful, huge baskets for that. I mean, like you could put, 100 pounds in that, and that thing was going to carry. But just bright, fun colors. And again, so creative. And this was, 10 years ago. Now you see them on the market quite often now here in the States. But one of the big opportunities was I went to a trade show. And that was very eye-opening because I could look around at the time and go, I know where that's made in Thailand. I know where that's made in Thailand. And that's when I started realizing for us to be sustainable and different, I needed to start designing everything. And so I kind of started taking their craft and really forming it into what does like a Sapahn brand. And the other, I would say, and again, this was just me for the first 10 years flying back to the States and having trunk shows and parties. And after, like I said, after we paid off our scholarship and then it was like, this is a scalable, profitable business. Of course, some of the other challenges was, okay, how do you grow your team and some of the other business things, but on the Thai production side, I started designing all of our collection, with artisans and community, some of the different community members.
But you've now narrowed your product line, right?
No. So at this point, I'm still 9 products lines that I would come back and do these shows. And after a bit, I started looking at my numbers, and 90% of my revenue came from this one collection, which is what you see is today our beautiful leather bags with this Omega hardware. It was all coming from this collection alone. So I had to make a huge and challenging decision. I need to focus because realizing also the person who's buying my $30 organic scarf is probably not the same customer. Could be, there could be some overlap, but not the same person who's buying a $300 leather bag.
Right.
And the profit, the margin and everything else is.
So as a brand, you had to decide who is your target, who is your market, and how do you align with them?
Yes. Because I said no to raising capital, and we had some people who wanted to invest. They believed in that. That's something I ultimately said, I don't want to do that quite yet, because I felt just my personality. It was nice to own it all and have that power to make the decisions what was best rather than be persuaded by other interests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then once those other interests are in there, there's some really interesting other case studies where as soon as outside capital comes in, they have different agendas, and then it's harder to maintain the
integrity of what your
objective.
Yep.
Right. So now today, what is Sapahn? Like, what is the business now, and who do you do it for? Like, you're no longer just doing trade shows and craft fairs and things like that, right? You've got a distribution system, an online program, a defined target market. Is that? Yeah,
all that's correct. And we still do art shows because it is, cost acquisition wise, it's one of the best. And we see when we meet people and connect with them, and they get to feel and touch the leather, it's a whole different experience. And then they have this beautiful journey then on our website, where they can continuously buy. So we do have an omni-channel. So we still do some wholesale where we ship to about 40 stores now. We do have a really strong online presence. And during COVID, we actually opened our first flagship store. Not a story you hear probably very often is opening a brick and mortar during COVID, but we were growing quite a bit at that stage. And it was really moving our product from somebody's basement, one of my employees' basement, who's been a part of the journey for a long time, because that was where fulfillment and shipping was out of, to we needed something bigger, a warehouse. And we thought, well, we could pair a warehouse office space, but why not sell out of it? And so we have this beautiful location in a neighborhood with about 10 other women-owned brands in Lincoln, Nebraska. So if you ever venture there, you have to check out the neighborhood and check out Sapahn and the other women in that community. But that was kind of another kind of stepping stone for us, was opening that brick and mortar. And people ask all the time, was that your dream to open a store? I'm like, no. No, because I like to be on the move, and but it did create an incredible experience for our customers and more customers to come and really see and feel what it's like, and get to explore all the different styles and the options, and get a kind of a taste of our energy, of our vibe, and kind of how we do business.
So now, what is the product line? Is it wallets, handbags, purses? Like how broad do you go, or how narrow do you define it?
Yeah, it is leather handbags, wallets, leather accessories, card holders, whatnot. But anywhere from your travel bags all the way down to like your keychains.
Now, I know when you and I spoke previously, the product quality of this is really, really high.
It is.
And so who is it for? Like, from a price point, you could probably at a quality to quality level, price it at a Versace kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you've chosen not to. So like who is your buyer?
And that was, you're totally right. The craftsmanship, it's made by, 23 women. You look at the quality of any luxury, it's made by very specific craftsmen. We decided to go more accessible. We wanted more people to experience it, to touch it. And that feels better with our ethos and our values. And so we would be considered an accessory luxury product, which is, a lot of customers would come in and they'll say, oh my God, this is how Coach used to make bags. Like back in the day, the quality, the buttery soft leather, just the thoughtfulness of the styles. This is how they did it back in the day. And so we're really that anywhere from $200 to $500, $200 to $300 price point. Is kind of that sweet spot. And really our customers, it's amazing. It's when you look at the demographics, it's, anywhere from late 20s to, 65, but that sweet spot is kind of that 30 to 55, professional, and not necessarily professional women, but, I would say like what we hear the most is, I love the bags because there's no logos. It's not, it's understated, but you can tell it's a high premium quality bag. You can feel it, you can see it. And it doesn't have all the flashiness. It's very timeless. And it also, how often you get a compliment on the bag and somebody's like, oh, I got it on sale at TJ Maxx. It's like, no, this opens up a whole different opportunity for engagement. And it speaks, to customers' values more, where, oh my God, I love your bag. And it's like, let me show you all the tricks it does. Like, it's not just the wallet, but it opens up and then you have this wristlet. And then it comes with a crossbody strap. And so it's like this whole like magical thing. And then it's like, and it's all made beautifully, fairly by women in Thailand. And that is what I think is the icing on the cake for our customers who are like, this is again, why I continue to buy. It's not only because it's quality, it's thoughtfully designed, but it's like impactful. I can take pride in what I'm carrying because of the due diligence that you guys have done in the whole production part.
So we'll get to that in a sec. There's a few business realities I want to just go at. So your business on its face kind of looks like a typical fashion related business, right? Outsources production to a lower cost environment, imports, and then distributes through a combination of wholesale, online, and retail. But like a lot of entrepreneurs, just as you described, you didn't start with a deep study of business. So I'm kind of curious about that. Like, were you a natural? Was there a steep learning curve? Like that's a sophisticated sequence of everything from production to distribution to sourcing product to building a labor team and then doing kind of marketing you're doing here. Like, did you get outside help? Did you self-teach? Was it just trial and error?
Well, I appreciate all those compliments. It's a lot of imposter syndrome. So even when you say that, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Do I know what I'm doing? But I would come back to the States. So I would, be in Thailand creating and doing my thing just as I thought intuitively, how do you do it? And of course, using these principles of, my human rights degree or my human rights background and how how do you communicate and build trust and then I would come back to the States, Lincoln, and they would have, these different, accelerators or business communities getting together and, over coffee. And so I started building some different community and people would, have guest lectures on different aspects of business and being an entrepreneur. And so that's kind of, building that community back in the States was super powerful. But it was kind of more like, oh, you're doing like, when somebody said, what's your marketing strategy? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I have a marketing strategy. And then they'd be like, well, how are you communicating to, customers? And I would give them this whole list. So I didn't really know the nuance, or that maybe the language, or it was, a lot of it was just self-taught. And then, but I will say, when it came down to, when I came back to the States after 10 years or there, I enrolled into a non-equity based accelerator program for like 6 weeks. And that's where I started to look more at my financials, because that was my biggest gap. So, talking to some of the advisors and bringing people more in the business who could help guide me in those directions. And that's kind of where I came to that conclusion of, I need to go this direction, focus on these certain lines of revenue or these product lines. So that was a huge part, was really coming back to those accelerators, or that accelerator for me. And over time, I've in the last couple of years, I've gotten involved in another amazing entrepreneur community called Pipeline in the Midwest. And that they pick 13 members each year of high growth companies in different industries. So that was just very, it's been really impactful, and as we scale and hitting different challenges that are completely out of my depth. And so, and having those people now to call on, or other people, that's been super helpful.
It's interesting because it's a theme that's sort of coming out through the podcast, that there's different versions of it, but some form of mentorship or community, and that kind of external both validation and support for the things you don't know, and that insatiable curiosity to learn. Like, a lot of people start in entrepreneurship and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, but that's like everybody.
Right.
And when you realize that everybody has that experience, and as long as you're curious and go just diligently try to figure it out, you're going to be able to.
Yeah. Well, and also, like, how do you deal with like rejection or failure? And it's kind of like, oh, it's not exciting. It sucks. But it's also like, oh, cool. I got better. I figured that out. I'm not going to do that again.
Right.
And then it's exciting to be like, when somebody else calls up and says, hey, Brooke, how did you do X, Y, and Z? It's like, it's the best. Like, I couldn't love that more. So I couldn't love the journey more, being like, let me share some experience, here's what I'm also, and that's like the beauty, I think, of the journey. Yeah.
And what about the design? Like, you said you do the design yourself?
Yeah.
So where did that come from? Like, that's again, not a natural design principles are
right. Tricky. They are. But I don't know. I just, I just started with my first collection. It's really funny. I designed it. I went walking the streets in Bangkok, and over the years, people would tell me I'd be in search of the best quality of hardware. Cause I'd find some, I'm like, okay, well, this doesn't match the quality of leather that we're at. So like the hardware was always lagging. And so I'd walk the streets and just meet different shop owners and talk to them. And so my first collection that I designed, this is my process, was I bought all these different, because there's so many aspects of designing a bag, with stitching, like what kind of piece of hardware you're going to get, and does it all match? And so I just bought all these samples of hardware, and go to the university, everyone else is writing their thesis, and I have this table spread out full of all these hardware pieces and paper, pencil, scissors, and like a stapler. Because I can't draw.
Right.
My drawings are terrible, but I have it in my head, and I'm like, so I just started drawing. I started making things with paper, and so, and putting, the hardware I thought I wanted it to go. And then I would ask my husband, who's amazing at drawing, can really do the 3D dimensional stuff. And so he would then draw it for me and be like, okay, I want it to look like this. I would do a really crappy sketch, and then he would make it look. And I remember the first time going to talk to the artisans, okay, like, here's my designs I want to make. It's very stupid, but it's really embarrassing, but I actually did them life size. So I'm drawing these whole bags out on this. And he looked, it was Mana's his name. It's so sweet. He's like, Brooke, he's very, very gracious with me and very patient, and was like, you can draw them like, I was like, I don't know why. I thought it needed to be at size. So he sent me home. I went back to the drawing board and got him, a little bit more detailed to what they needed and precise. And so, but it's this beautiful back and forth with them, sitting at the table saying, here's what I'm envisioning. Here's what I want it to do. We draw it out together. I draw it, he makes it better. and then they make the pattern. So I don't make the pattern. They're incredibly talented at making those things come to life. So they draw the pattern on cardstock. We don't use any technology in terms of a lot of, I guess, from what I hear in the industry, you do it on paper, it prints out, your design, and everything is done just on a cardstock and then traced out on the leather and all cut by hand. And then sewn, with the sewing machine. And so there's with a lot of our designs, a lot of very finite details that go into obviously the measurement, the thickness of the leather. So
that's fun. Like that's the craft. That's craftsmanship.
Again. And I'm like, these are the people brands are hiding. These are really brilliant, talented artists, craftsmen, like really incredible people. And I wanted their stories in that to be seen and heard. Like, because sometimes people are like, well, I thought just like, and I don't know sometimes what we think as consumers, because it was like, this is such good quality. How is it handmade? I'm going, how do you think anything is made? It's mostly made by hand. A lot of things are. I mean, yes, there's some machinery who can, that now can do a lot, but the really nice stuff, I mean, like it's piece by piece, it's by your hands.
So what part of business did you find most difficult to learn? Like, was it production? Was it marketing? Was it creating systems? Is it
systems?
Yeah.
Yeah. And staying to the systems, creative, visionary, like, okay, let's try, it's hard to put me in a consistent line sometimes. But of course we need a little chaos to create the kind of the magic.
Yeah.
And that's where after some trial and error, I hired this incredible woman. Her name's Cassie. She's our marketing director, but she also is an ops person. So she has our, business in a very systematic way, especially within marketing, I would say. But the logistics of production is still on me, but that's something I know because I know the people so well and just the system and how it all works. A lot of the component is culture. And I think this is where big businesses get it wrong. They don't, it's like, it's a factory. It's like, I give you this, you input, you output this. But if you really want to get efficient with how your production works and the quality and everything, you really have to understand the people. And that's kind of like, I know how to communicate and how things will work and not work, or how to get things done well.
All right, so now let's get to the business model, because this is really, it's fun. It's such a fascinating story. This could be a 4-hour podcast, but I won't let you do that. I respect your time. What makes the model unique? Like, what are the ways in which you have incorporated your human rights philosophy? Like you said to me at one point, like you actually wanted this to be a case study, right?
Yes. Because how often are people like, well, we can't afford that? They're like, oh, really? Huh. I think first and foremost, it's again, like we know the people who are making our things. And they have say in how everything works. And a lot of times it's top down. It's like, I'm going to give you this for this. And a lot of it comes to, there's so much agency tied to wage, right? And so much, I want to say.
Are you talking generally in the industry?
Yeah. Well, just in general, like if I can give, and just it unleashes, if I can give somebody agency, and part of the agency is like, the ability to have a voice and be able to communicate. Like artists and people who are making these things, they're creative humans. They have a skill. And so I think, so part of it is engaging them in the whole, like even design process, and the whole process of how we're making things, that they have a voice in that. They also have a voice in the pricing. So collectively, they set the price of what the product, or what, at the end of the day, what this costs. Mm-hmm. And we honor that. It's, there's no question. This is what, there's so much I don't know. And over time I can figure out, but what are local standards of living and livable wages and And sometimes I don't know all the intricacies of the cost of certain things. And so that is something collectively they create and set, and that's something we honor. Now, if you go back to business as we're taught in school, it's like the best thing, as you scale, it's like you go back to your vendors and like see how much you can cut off that at that production cost.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest mistake people make.
So say more about that. Why do you think that? Why is that a mistake?
Because $1 to you and $1 to them is life-changing for them.
Right.
Yeah. And I like it also then workers, you want to empower your workers to do phenomenal work, right? And what's the worst thing you can do to disempower them is pay them less, because then they can't take care of the family. They can't and what's their best way to resist? Don't do good work.
Mm.
Don't show up, right? Don't.
And even if it isn't that diabolical, just at a pure physiological to psychological
100%.
piece. If you're sick, if you're stressed about looking after your kids, your creative faculties in your brain are just not engaged as effectively.
Right. And you look, again, when you were asking how the similarities, this is humans, right? Think of a time when you or yourself has been so stressed with finances or whatever it might be. You can't do your best work. You're a mess, you're a mess. And again, then it's and that doesn't have to be that way.
No, so that's the piece I'm going to. There's some other things to the human rights thing you've injected, but just on that point,
yes,
it doesn't have to be that way. Okay, that's the argument,
mm-hmm.
right? That people will always say, you don't know, it has to be that way because our consumers aren't going to buy it because they're wanting the lowest cost, and so the only way we can keep our costs down is to pay our labor minimal amounts.
Yeah,
and you're saying it doesn't have to be that way. So
yeah.
Where is that analysis flawed? Where are people getting that wrong?
I think part of it is, I think it comes back to the high level, where's the money going? If it's not a profitable business, then I think it's a case of, is this a sustainable business in general? Should this exist? If you can't pay them a livable wage and do all your other operating, then I think it's a business question of then do you have a business?
Yeah.
Because it's not to have a business. So then let's flip if you have the business, quote unquote, and you're exploiting people to have a business, is that a business?
Right.
It's a business right? And I would push back, because a lot of the people who say they can't do that, and the customers, we're putting the burden then on the customer. We're putting the burden on the artisans who are making it, or the people who are making it, and the customers. But what about our shareholders? What about the people, us, the profit, as the shareholders of the people later? And they're the ones, when you look at one of my favorite stats that I've recently come across with any B Corps, their ratio is 6-1 from how high the CEO is paid versus the lowest paid person.
Right.
But you look at some of the larger corporations and it's 344-1.
Right.
So that's when I say that's not the problem. I think we can see where the problem is, and it's not the customers, and it's not the people who are making your product.
This is the part where, for listeners, this is super challenging, because I've actually said a version of what you said many times before, that you don't get to go to the gas station and say, I want to pay 20 cents less per liter, right? The gas station's going to go, get out of here.
Yeah.
Right. You don't get to go to the material supplier. You don't get to go to the tax authority. You don't get to go to your accountant and say, I'm going to pay you 50% less. But somehow there's this assumption that it's okay to go to labor who have no power and say, I'm going to pay you less than what it takes you to live. Right? The gas station is saying, no, you can't pay me less because I can't survive my
it doesn't work
business that way. And so if I can't live, and support my family and have a lifestyle on that, then what you're saying is, your business is not structured properly.
Right.
Like the business should not exist if it cannot pay for its inputs in a way that allows it to produce a profit on the output side.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a hard thing. It's an ethical and a business consideration, I think, for people to have, right? To sort of say, okay, does my business model, is it viable? Like if my business model does not allow me to pay the cost of my inputs, then either my business model doesn't work or I have to get better as an entrepreneur, which is kind of like why I do what I do as a business coach. Like, you can get it better. And one of the things you said to me that I was fascinated about before is like your margins, without giving any secrets, but your margins are industry competitive, right?
Industry competitive. Exactly. And so we could, and then something I've considered is we could cut out the wholesale opportunity for people. It changes our business model. But if I was really serious about wanting to make this work for everyone, there's other things you can move around.
Mm-hmm.
And you would, then it's, you can, I could change that part of our business and remove some of that wholesale opportunity out, but that does change then my revenue streams. And so I look at other people who are doing something similar and say, similar things of like, is there any, what other ways can you make that also more efficient is what you're saying as well.
Yeah. So for you to make those margins the same. So I know some people are listening going, well, that sounds all sweetness and light, but like, how the hell are you actually managing to maintain margins? Because I run a t-shirt business and I can't get decent margins unless I drive wages down. So is it the efficiency of the workers that because they're motivated as part of an organization that cares about them? Do you have really tight systems or production systems that are more efficient than the way other people do it? Like, what do you attribute your ability to maintain those margins to?
I'm not trying to sit here on the stage also and be like, it's super easy because yes.
Oh no.
All the costs have gone up. Right. And so, but I think then we have this opportunity now of marketing. It's an opportunity and a challenge. Like, when it comes to marketing and telling the story, we can tell this story and people like our customers are going to be spent like when we talk to them and survey them, they're going to be I want to buy something. I'm going to buy this. I'm buying a bag. I buy a bag every couple months, and it's then a choice of which bag do I buy. And so for us, we stand out in how we do business. And that is kind of our market. That is some of our leverage where we can say, you can feel good about what you're buying. It's unique. It's, it's not only unique, but it's done in an ethical way. And customers want that. So part of what I'm saying is also customers are wanting more connection, more business that are aligned with their values. And so for us, it's in how well can you then communicate, what your product solves, the problem it solves, the solution, the positioning of it all.
Right. Now, what else do you do on the human rights side? Because it's one thing you talked about fair living wages and decent working conditions, but you've done some other things around collective bargaining and supporting people in their lives. Like, if you can just sort of almost laundry list, like the things you do that are unusual, but like really inject that human rights philosophy into the structure of the business. Yeah.
So, some of them, different religions. And so we allow that to be practiced. So different holidays that they would be taking off. There is also just flex with parents, workers taking care of their elders or their, people at home. So there's flexibility in some of the working days and hours. There is, the model originally was we would give out scholarships, so we'd give some smaller micro loans, not even loans, just scholarships to some of the children in the village and different community aspects. So supporting the different needs that they also had as a community. and again, that's kind of going back, but that used to be tied to our whole business model. And that got kind of messy, as you can imagine. But, and when we went back to the people, our artisans that we were serving, they were like, we know how to send our kids to school and pay, basically, if we need a new sewing machine, buy that. But if we don't have the opportunity that you're creating for us, how do we go about doing that? How do we make that opportunity happen? And so it's really having that voice, again, during COVID was a big example for us is they actually came back to us and said, hey, we have this great idea. We can use the dead stock lining of your handbags to make face masks. And that would, because everything was shutting down in Thailand, there was no tourism. And so that different change of business pathways allowed them, again, to another avenue for them to come to us and say, hey, we have an opportunity for you. And we think this would serve us really well. So those are some different, ways we've honored them.
I may have it wrong, but I thought you said it's something do you encourage a kind of collective bargaining?
Yeah, where they can, they communicate together on the wages and how the increase of the product over time. And that is something they collectively will come back to us and have conversations of increasing the product prices. And that's what they do internally as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And so throughout it, it's like people feel they're treated with dignity.
Yeah. And they have a vote, we ask them, right? So I think most of the times, you don't even ask, there is no back and forth dialogue in the whole process.
And what has it done? How would you describe the culture, particularly there? Not Thai culture, but the culture of your business in the production.
In the production, it's very family oriented. They care, there's a deep sense of care. So for them, one woman during it was like, I just need to come to work. I need to see, I need to be I know there's not jobs to be done right now, but I need to have my hands on things. I need to be with my people and, in a community. So for them, it's one of the most surprising things was when I interviewed a group of weavers, even they said, it was what's the biggest impact we're making Sapahn is with this, with your village. And I thought it was economic. And they're like, you give us a sense of community and a sense of a reason to come together. And sometimes we need that reason to come together. And also it's so that it's very dignified to do something where you're appreciated for the work you're doing, that somebody values that. Right. It's been the opposite where they've turned around or turned away another small brand client that didn't honor that. It was stress, it was a lot of negativity on this isn't right, faster production lines or timelines. And that burnt everyone out. And it created so much anxiety and stress on everyone. And so I would say that's another reason of with the dialogue back and forth and how we set timelines, it's done in a very, reciprocal, respectful way, but that's not the case in a lot of situations.
And it creates, most businesses have concerns about turnover and that kind of thing. How do you track those numbers, or is that?
Yeah, we've tracked that during COVID. It's lower, significantly lower. Now the challenge sometimes is during COVID, we had a few people who were I went and found other work, and inside our community, and it was understandable because we didn't have we didn't have the volume to keep everyone employed at a full-time capacity through that time. And now it's hard to you can't it takes time to train and to kind of build people, into this role, because it is a little bit more skilled than, learning how to cook something or and so that it has been a challenge, but generally a lot of our team has been there 10 plus years.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So what's the, actually two different questions. First is your customers. What do you lead with for them? Is it the product quality, or is it do people buy because I really like this leather and there's this nice stuff about the people over there that makes me feel better about the bag? Or is it no, that's really an important piece? And from a marketing thing, it's always interesting.
Totally.
like Tesla they didn't lead with we're green or we're an electric car. It's like, this is a high performance vehicle. And that's why a lot of people bought it, even if they didn't give a rat's behind about the climate, So in yours, like
it's human. So I think we thought, okay, people want because of this, because of the impact. And, but people then also have their perception when we would be like, invite them at the early days of come to this event. It's handcrafted, beautiful. And they had what they had in their mind didn't look like this. Right. So I think it was just a whole different thing for them to wrap their brains around. So we switched it. And at the end of the day, when we, interview all of our, customers, some of them have been very forward and like, it's, what's in it for me? And I love this because I look good and I feel good. And like, it's a cool bag. It's quality. It's, it's very functional. It fits those needs, kind of utilitarian needs, but it also looks cool. And it's, it's not something everyone else has. And so that is ultimately where we kind of talk first and foremost, feel it, touch it, like, get excited, like you can get excited about picturing it in your life and where you're going to go on your next trip with it. And you're buying it to celebrate a milestone of something. And it's not, and then it's more the icing on the cake. But I will say more and more people come back after, they've had one and they're, have now 5 or 6. And I've heard more and more customers say, I have my Louis Vuittons and like my luxury bags, but I always tend to go towards this. And nice. I realize, I realized how my values weren't aligned in even that purchase. Like the Louis Vuitton, that says nothing. That says, something of status, but like, that doesn't really say much about who I am. I mean, it does, but that's not the picture they want to paint. And we've had like I said, so many customers who are like, I didn't realize, I had 2 conversations recently. I didn't realize I'm here donating to all these nonprofits, trafficking, domestic violence and abuse. And I give philanthropy, like very strongly in the philanthropy world. But then on the other side, I'm buying these products that go completely against the women and the people I'm trying to support.
Right.
That's, like I'm, so I think that's more of a awareness that I'm hoping to inspire and create with people of like, you don't have to like, totally just quit your job and go do some, philanthropy work. But like, it's as basic as take a second and just think about what you're buying and who it's coming from. And who are those companies like you are supporting and those people and how do they, does that align with your values and how you're donating? And another customer said to us, it's like, I feel like I'm like doing my civil duties and share, like by buying something like this and it feels easy and beautiful. So, but there are more and more companies that you can align easily with that. And I know it
requires a little bit of research.
A little bit of research. Yeah. And I mean, a little bit of research and it's, I know a lot of, customers oftentimes will say like, but they're so much more expensive, but in price comparison of a level of quality of such, they're not. They're very priced appropriately. And just in people who do want to shop more ethically, more sustainably, yes, the products are going to tend to be more expensive, but the times that the quality and how long you'll use it and the longevity of that will pay dividends over the cheap thing that you get to wear, once or twice.
Right.
And so I think there's been some good studies recently on kind of some of those cost breakdowns, actually, even with luxury. And so you're getting the value, but yes, you're not, do you really need 10 new pairs of, clothing items this month? No, probably not. Probably not. So I think it is, again, checking yourself and like, okay, don't give into your weaker self. Don't walk into Zara or H&M or shop online at Shein or, because those are notoriously known for very, incredible human rights abuses.
And that's a lot of people just don't know that, right? Or they turn a blind eye. So having the choice of, and I really like on your website, right at the beginning, it asks people what their primary driver or value is. So you're educating people right out of the gate. What's the sort of big Uber vision? What's the, 5 years? Are we taking over the fashion industry? Are we international? Where's Sapahn going to be?
I think those are all would be all appropriate visions and to have. And it's, we are, growing more internationally. And I think some of the bigger visions is who else can we collaborate with who have similar drivers and similar, aspirations to change this and be a better case study as we grow. It's like, how can we be a better case study for people who can't, they can't be naysayers anymore. Like they've, and also here's a pathway of how you can change that. And so I think being an inspiration for other businesses or people in businesses who say, hey, like stand up to and just question, like, is that really what we need to do? Or what can we do differently? And, be more of that opportunity creator rather than, test and challenge your business to stretch in those different ways that you feel is impossible.
There's actually a really interesting model that I've come across recently. Like there's something in business called red teaming. Some people call it black hatting or red teaming, which is you bring a group of people in to poke holes at your business idea or your idea to see whether it's going to work or not. But there's a variation on that called yellow teaming, which is assuming the business is viable within its stated business objectives. Yeah. What are the ancillary unintended externalities or unintended consequences of what we're doing? And how does that influence our business model? And there's even a variation on that within a theory of feminist entrepreneurship, which says there's 3 questions, which is who's included, who's excluded, and are we okay with that? Yeah, so 3 questions. And it's really powerful. But to ask business owners to just think about the externalities, not just the narrow definition of whether this can create a profitable business, regardless of what, external consequences could be.
Right. I like that. I'm gonna have to look more into that.
Yeah. And then for you, like one of the notions, right, is always what got me here won't get me there. So yes. Get to that global conquest vision. What do you think? Like, what do you have to do either differently, better, or learn more?
Yeah, I think individually, I hear it all the time, and it's getting out there, telling our story more. As in making that more of a presence. And I think the other thing is, again, one reason is we've always functioned this way in 14 years of business, but recently we applied to be a B Corp and we are B Corp certified. And so it's like now we're a part of all these other communities who are like-minded in these bigger missions. And so how can we collaborate? How can we, leverage similar audiences? How can we deliver better products to customers who want to shop the way we produce? Right.
And the B Corp environment provides a lot of opportunities to do that.
Right. Yeah. And there's some other challenges, like, for the longest time, it took me 7 years to track who's dyeing our leather, our tannery in Thailand, to open those doors, to build those relationships. 7 years.
Wow.
And once I got there, then it was like, we could use a better water purification system, when I think about our impact on the environment. And that held me back a long time, being like, I don't really want to promote Sapahn too much because we're not perfect. We haven't figured that out. And it's like, well, we've got the good part on our artisans and our wages in that side, but this other component of environment, like how do we address that? And, again, collaborating with other people who've built those different relationships, and collaborations of, instead fashion use, and it still is, it's changing. I think there's people at the high level saying, let's be more collaborative. Let's, here's my factory. If you come in, like, why don't you come do work here? Because we can then together increase and higher the standard.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
So that's, you're seeing a little bit more of that, because when, our tannery comes to me, they're like, that's just not, you're not ordering enough for us to make it a business decision to do that.
Got it.
And so that's a challenge. Then I'm like, okay, how do I figure out that problem then? Could I raise, could I do some fundraising? Could I bring in, but, even if you have this amazing then new equipment that can do all this, this whole water purification system better. But it'd be a pity for not more people in that local area to not be able to access it as well. So yeah, how can we be more collaborative in nature? That's just one thing. And I think it's, how can we be, I just said it, but how can we be more collaborative? Because those are my challenges. And I'm sure so many people have similar ones. People come to me often and say, I want to develop this product line, but I don't know where or how. And I don't want to go to China. And so I'm like, well, there's a lot of opportunity I know in Thailand. And so if we can continue to make those bridges, and that's kind of, again, B Corp and just getting people together. And I'm hoping, especially within the fashion industry, there's some, Eileen Fisher and some other brands who are really trying to address this. And people trying to address the whole, I read a study, we have enough clothing produced for the next 6 generations. So we also need to make just blatant business decisions to stop doing that.
Right.
But again, it's creating some billions of dollars for, Joe over here. And who's holding Joe accountable?
And so how will you do that?
That's what I don't know. But I'm I think by part of it's just being like, again, customers, empowering and bringing awareness to customers is one way.
Right.
It's a slow activist way. But I think that's where the next generations are totally, the younger generations are aligned in that.
And that may be where that B Corp community is an opportunity. Like there is value in multiple voices, right, as opposed to one voice singing in the wilderness. A whole bunch of people who are in retail starting to sing the song. Like it still astonishes me the extent to which many people do not know anything about exploitative labor. Or there's another person appearing on the podcast. He's involved heavily in modern day slavery.
Yeah.
And its eradication. And to hear that, there's modern day slavery in North America, in the plants of brands that we buy from every day.
Exactly.
And that people just don't know about it. And so to have a collection of voices, from entrepreneurs like you who are singing that song,
100%.
But you're right, it does create that sort of need for collaboration and collective action. Great opportunity.
Yeah, we've got a lot of work to do ahead of us.
And just at a pure business level, like for you, are there any business skills or practices that you're feeling you need to develop in order to get to that level that would give you that voice?
I think it is going. You're always trying to strengthen your strategy. So I think getting very clear, a little bit more clarity around the strategy and how we're getting from A to, from D to whatever, like how we're going to go to the next. What is that trajectory? What is that strategy forward? Right. There's, a lot of different components, but what is that one that's really going to move our needle the fastest? Is it, speaking, is it talking more? Is it doing more collaborations, with corporate, there's so much corporate gifting. There's so much gifting that goes on and so many levels. Like how could we collaborate with people who could literally be so proud to have this, because you're spending the money anyways, but how can you do it in a more impactful way without, so those are some different ways that we're, but I think that's for me is building the strategy and then, finding the right people in place to help make that next leap of growth.
Yeah, that's actually fascinating.
From the 7-figure brand to how do we get into the multiple double, and for us, when I'm around other business owners, it's profit isn't my main driver, but I'm like, the more people who carry this, they're making a statement and there's more awareness that comes with it. So there's more opportunity to talk about human rights and what it is and how it impacts, like you said, modern day slavery here in the US. Go to a chicken plant, go to a factory, who's making our food. Good luck trying to get in, but it's very heavily protected by business interest. Right. So we're also not being held accountable. Why can't people get away with this? Where is the do no harm, and where is the legislation to hold people accountable?
Mm-hmm. Now, as a business, it's interesting. I have some clients in the event space, and one of the conversations that isn't loud, but that it's happening, is in a lot of events, there's always swag. But a lot of people are saying, well, the swag is pretty environmentally destructive and doesn't have social impacts and that kind of thing. So just what you're like, just changing the whole notion of corporate swag is a huge opportunity.
Huge. And because who needs another whatever, right? Like,
yeah. Interesting. Well, so where can people find you? Like I'm sure some people have been listening going, so this stuff, you keep saying it's really high quality. Where do I go find it?
Give it an experience. Sapahn.com.
How do you spell it?
Yes, it's Sapahn, and it means bridge in Thai. So Sapahn.com, of course, on our Instagram, Facebook, and we are on LinkedIn as well. So if you are listening, you're a podcast or you're another, a corporate brand who also wants a gift in a beautiful way, let us know. Let me know, and I'd love to connect you to something really beautiful.
Well, thank you. As we say in Thailand, Kap Kum Kap.
What a pleasure.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure it both challenged and inspired a whole lot of people. And I'm hoping much continued success to you and your whole team.
Thank you very much.